Hello BookTube, Books with Banks back again with my 20th and final video in this series I've been doing analyzing various scenes from all throughout Stephen Erikson's Malazan Book of the Fallen and other Malazan related works. And today I'm looking at a scene near the end of Fall of Light, Book 2 in Erikson's Kharkanas trilogy. I will say heavy spoilers ahead for all of what's published in this trilogy so far, but that being said, if you're at an earlier point in the series and you want to avoid spoilers, please go check out some of my other videos up to wherever you read through, whatever you're caught up through. All that said, let's get into it. So today I want to look at the introduction to one of my favorite depictions of an epic climax, an epic battle that I've ever read. For some context, basically the first two books of this whole trilogy, the only two out at the time I'm making the video, this video, they're all building up to an epic battle between the forces of light in Sanders' Legion and the forces of darkness fighting to defend Mother Dark and her union with Draconis, whether she wants them to or not. So nearly a couple thousand pages of build-up, and Erikson, I think, outdoes himself by approaching the telling of this battle from a few unique vantage points that you don't typically see in the fantasy genre. So there's some people watching a raging storm high above the battlefield, and they're from far away. They can't actually see any of the action on the ground. But then you also have a historian who's losing his mind for fear of what's to come, and he's narrating kind of in his mind what's likely happening on the battlefield without actually, the historian's not actually there. There are some bits of the action at hand that Erikson puts us in the shoes of the characters there to show us some of what's taking place, but a lot of that is actually a bit out of chronological order. And then last but not least, my favorite vantage point, my favorite piece of this whole kind of structure that Erikson has given this final battle is a boy and an old man playing with the old man's war figurines and toy soldiers off in the distance, a good ways away from the battlefield. And through them playing with these toys, Erikson is able to keep this child from literally joining the action like the boy wants to, but Erikson is also able to show us, the audience, the absurdity in the ritual of these battles. And I think this condemnation of warfare is more scathing and powerful than any of the inner monologues we've gotten throughout both books in this trilogy so far. So anyway, this miniature battle is broken up into primarily two separate scenes, and I'm going to read through the first one so as not to spoil too much of what happens. I was also inspired to settle on this specific moment by a recent video that AP Canavan posted on his Critical Dragon channel between himself and Stephen Erikson, and their conversation was all about magic. The old man character in this scene has a lot to say about magic in the fantasy genre. So with these two things in mind, number one being the continued critique of the absurdity of violent war and civilizations tearing themselves apart, and number two being Erikson's commentary on the role of magic and things like magic systems in epic fantasy. With those things in mind, let's get into it. And we're starting at page 1012 in the Bantam Mass Market paperback here. Some distance ahead, he saw another lone figure, tall, dressed in heavy robes, hobbling like a man with broken feet. It did not take long before Rennet caught up and came alongside the man. A narrow, deeply lined face, an iron-gray beard, snarled and seemingly stained with rust. Seeing Rennet, the old man smiled. "Late to the battle, soldier? As am I, as am I. Shall we hasten? I have no houseblades. They must have left without me. No, wait, that's not right. My houseblades bear the swords I forged, my armor too. I made them into a legion. I left them somewhere. I'll remember where, I'm sure, sooner or later. Ah. He took a few quick steps forward, leaned down to collect a rock, and showed it to Rennet. "Slag," he said, his face twitching. "You find it everywhere. Our legacy, my son's wife. You know her?" When they were but betrothed, I happened upon her in a room and saw that she had a small blade in one hand, and she was using it to cut the insides of her thighs. She was hurting herself, you see. I could make no sense of it, can you?" Rennet wanted to hurry on, leave the strange old man behind. Instead, he shrugged. She was trying to feel something, anything. But she was loved. We all loved her. Surely she understood that. Rennet glanced back to the mass of ghosts on the road behind them. She didn't believe you. You loved her because you didn't really know her. That's what she believed, I mean. You didn't know her, so whoever you loved wasn't her. It was someone else. Someone who just looked like her, but she knew better. Ginny, wait for me. Don't do anything to hurt yourself, and please, please, don't let me see you among these ghosts. The old man still held out the ragged piece of slag, and now he closed his fingers about it, tight enough to break skin and draw blood. It ran down the edge of his palm, down to stain his cuff. He offered Rennick a ghastly smile. Every pit we carved into the earth, every hill we tore down, every tree we burned, the wastelands of poison we left behind. It's the same, young soldier, exactly the same. Wounding ourselves and, as you say, wounding ourselves because we're not who we think we are. We're far less than that, he grunted. I used to play in the murdered places with my toys, my painted heroes of lead and pewter. He reached round and drew out a heavy leather satchel he had been carrying, hidden beneath his cloak. I brought them along, you see, because we're going to have a battle. Okay, first break here, and here we go. We're introduced to our main players in this kind of literal game of toy soldiers. One being the young boy Rennick, eager to get to the war and to get to the fighting. The other one being this old man who is too tired and crazy to find his way there. And they introduced this theme of self-harm, but also this idea of looking back on youth. So think about these things and the ideas of maturity versus immaturity as we continue through the scene. Moving on. It'll be a real battle, sir, and I need to get there in time, so we have to hurry. You take one side and I'll take the other. I have ones painted in green livery, others in blue. Upon either side of the ditch here, we line them up, you see. He reached out and grasped Rennick's arm, pulling him to the side of the road. I'm green and you're blue, he said, his eyes bright as he spilled out what was in the satchel. Rennick looked down on the battered toy soldiers, 100 or more. He watched as the old man deftly separated the two colors, pushing the blue-painted ones up against Rennick's worn boots. But we need rules for this, the old man continued as he collected up the green soldiers and made his way across the snow-filled ditch and seated himself on the far bank. Fronting strength, flanking weakness, adds and subtracts, the attrition of unrelieved pressure. I have dice for this, knucklebones in fact, not Tice, of course. Forel can. I'll explain the adds and subtracts once our troops engage. Quickly now, line yours up there along the valley's crest. Sir, the real battle. You will obey your lord. Rennick flinched at the shouted command, and then he set the spear down to one side and knelt on the edge of the road. Yes, my lord. The first of the ghosts reached them, passing along on the road, paying no attention whatsoever to the two figures off to one side. The old man licked his purple lips and began speaking in a quick, almost breathless tone. I have my Hust Legion, see? I told you I would find them, and here they are. He gestured down at his green-painted toys. Superb soldiers, one and all. Can you hear their swords? Bitter prisons, making the iron howl. They have bonuses against pressure, but you, Sander, you have bonuses for ferocity, for all that your soldiers learned fighting the Jellic. You see how it balances out? We are well suited in opposition. Yes, my legion can hold its ground. Yours can attack like no other. Our strengths lock horns, as it should be. Okay, another break here, because now we're getting into this brilliant, kind of analogous game that they're playing, and there must be rules for this, that quote, right? So this brings up a few things to mind. First and foremost, Erikson and Esselmont created this whole Malazan world out of a tabletop RPG game, but furthermore they felt too constrained by the limitations and the systems and structures inherent in so many of those games, so they broke free of that a little bit. Again, please check out the recent video on A Critical Dragons channel to hear more about this and more why watching that video made me want to make this one kind of as a bit of a response. And I put a link to that down in the comments. But then let's also think about how great it is that all subtlety is pretty much fallen to the wayside, and I think this happens the moment the old man shouts, you will obey your lord. That feels to me like Erikson saying, no, readers, stop impatiently waiting for the big battle at the end. Pay attention instead to this mock game in front of you. This is actually what's important. And I love his Erikson's boldness in doing so. Just saying outright, You're Urosanders Legion, and I'm the Husted Mother Darks, or through the old man saying that. Also, I love that they're playing with 4 Rollcan dice instead of Teist dice, because as I go into this a little more in one of my other videos, but this war in this prequel trilogy, it's all really about a blinding sort of self-righteous justice and the just cause and justifying, and those are all themes much more heavily linked to the Forquil Assail that we knew from Malazan Book of the Fallen than any of the Tice characters and storylines we knew from that series. So anyway, with all that kind of in our minds, let's move on. Rennek paused in lining his soldiers up along the edge of the ditch. He thought back to all the mock battles he played with young Orphantal and tried to recall what Orphantal had said about strategies and tactics and other things Rennek didn't really understand. But just like Orphantal, this old lord had a fever for war. Rennek frowned. But, my lord, if our strengths lock horns, then more soldiers die. I should trick you into attacking me, and then withdraw once you're down in the valley, and then come in on your flanks. I should make you turn to defend and then get you to attack over and over again. That way, I can still use my strength even as I turn yours into a weakness. The Lord stared across at him and then giggled. Yes, of course, but you see, nobody's supposed to win. We both get bloodied and then we both withdraw. Better yet, we turn on our commanders and why? We cut their heads off. We throw down our weapons, throw away our armor. We tell the bastards to go fuck themselves and then we go home. Ha! He half slid down onto the ditch's slope. Now, it's time to advance, to war. The standards are raised. This is the secret joke, you see. When we all agree on insanity, it's still insane. Rennek watched the old man laugh. Watched the face redden, the watery eyes bulging. He wondered at the joke, not quite sure of it, and then he wondered if that joke might end up killing the Lord as the tears ran down the old man's lined cheeks, as the laughter grew more helpless, and finally as, hysterical, the breaths growing harder and harder to draw, the man choked and gagged, clutching his chest. The ghosts marched past, pebble-eyed, fixed on nothing. Upon each side of the ditch, a few of the tiny soldiers toppled in the wind as the wet mud gave way beneath them. Okay, so another break, because there's a lot more to unpack here. We basically have Rennek trying to explain that there won't be a stalemate, because he and the old lord can use things like strategy and tactics to try to outsmart each other, but then of course the old man counters that no one is really supposed to win. It doesn't matter how many people die in the standstill. Everyone has signed onto this sort of insane idiot's contract. That means people on both sides have to die for a while before the conflict might be resolved some other way. And this whole segment, I think, is basically the argument that great strategy or terrible tactics, it doesn't really matter because in the end, the whole concept is idiotic and flawed from the start. But time and time again, civilization after civilization, warfare, this type of thing tragically keeps repeating itself, keeps happening. Anyway, moving on. Gasping, the Lord righted himself and wiped at his eyes. Now, he said in a rasp, it begins with magic or so, I'm told. Powerful spells, but the first and most powerful one no one even sees. It's the sorcery of war itself, the ritual words flung back and forth, everyone moving into place. There, set those up again. It's not yet time for them to fall, but they've all agreed. There's no choice. You have to agree on that first. You have to weave it, a web that snares everyone. No choice, no choice. Must be done, draw the sword. There's no choice. We agree on that. We have to agree on that to begin with. No choice, oh dear, no choice. Oh, how sad, how regrettable. No choice. Keep saying it and it comes true. Do you understand? No choice. He sighed, leaned back to study his troops. Split into 3, the center will advance first, the wings will stretch and form the horns. This is simple tactics, you understand. Nothing subtle or clever on this day. But wait, before all that, the mages must duel. Rennek looked back to the road, watching the dead filing past. There were many soldiers among them. What do the mages do? He asked the Lord. The old man frowned. I don't know. Let me think. Magic. There must be a structure to it, lest it serve nefarious purposes. It cannot simply be a force no one understands. Not a metaphor, then. Nothing like a poet's meat. People make use of it, after all, don't they? But Lord, I don't understand. Sorcery. If this, then not that. If that, then not this. Chart the cause and effect, mutter and write notes, and pretend that such things impose limits and rules, abeyances and prohibitions, all these contingencies to milk the brain with an inventor's delight. Pah! The poet's meat is a better way of seeing it. Metaphor. Meat to be wrung until the blood drips. Meat to invite thoughts of rendering, something hacked away from some unseen body. A giant's corpse lying unseen in the forest, or among the hills, or amidst storm clouds in the sky. The flesh in one hand dripping with heat, the butcher's take on the world, where all invites the cleaver and knife, where all must perforce be lifeless to take the cut, the cold, empty chop. Yet look! The flesh cut away bleeds still, and there is heat and something pulses, the twitch of wounded nerves. He paused to regain his breath, and then pointed across at Rennick. The poet knows it's alive. The butcher believes it dead. Thus, the gift upon one side, and upon the other, the taker of that gift. The sorcerer, the butcher, the blind, clumsy bastard. The Lord shifted to study his rows of soldiers, and then reached down and lifted one free. Here he is. The poet recoils. All those tales of childhood, the magics and the witches and wizards, the cursed gems and sacred swords. Magic, my young friend, belongs to twin goddesses. And he smiled. I see them still. Name this first one Wonder, and she leads you by the hand into unlikely realms. Your delight is her reward. Now, the other, why, let's call her Warning. The other side to every magical gift, to every strange world. The poet knows all this, or the poet should, at any rate. Wonder and Warning. What other detail does one need in the comprehension of magic? Rennick shrugged, and then, when that did not seem enough, he shook his head. We use what we don't understand, the Lord explained, scowling. It's a simple message, a simple metaphor. We use what we don't understand. To invent rules and make charts and lists is to forget the meaning of the metaphor. Such a mind is locked into its rational cage, a most limited realm, a realm of self-delusion and presumption, a narcissistic stance, and the rules and logic only serve to reflect the brilliance of the one using them, as if, indeed, that is the singular purpose of the entire pointless exercise. He wagged a finger at Rennick. The poet cocks a leg and pisses on them all. It's meat, and the meat bleeds, and the blood is warm, and the blood fills the cup of the hand, and to use it is to kill it, and to kill it is a crime. He set down the soldier he'd collected, positioned further down the bank of the ditch. My idiot champion of ignorance. Now you. Wait, what is your name? Rennick. Now, good Rennick, select your champion. Okay, only one more break here before I finish reading the scene, but this is the segment that I think really goes hand in hand with AP and Erikson's recent video conversation, with the old man being so frustrated because for this game to play out right, he at first needs to think that there must be some kind of structure or rule book to the magic that their pieces are going to be using. And magic here is similar to artillery in real-world battles, if that wasn't clear in this Malazan work or any of the other series. But the man wants these magical playing pieces to follow the same sort of structure and that idiot's contract I mentioned before that he's been alluding to. However, the old lord realizes that he can't control the magical elements of the world without claiming this sort of total narcissistic omnipotence over the battlefield and the story. And in doing that, in acknowledging that, he would be letting the magic god of Warning, I think, overtake the magic god of Wonder, or the magic goddess of Warning overtake the magic goddess of Wonder. And this old man, this old lord, he's frustrated by that. He doesn't want to do that. And this, I think, is a brilliant metaphor, actually, to articulate the power that a fantasy author has when they go about world building and designing magic systems, or at least thinking about how to incorporate magic into their worlds, how much they want it to have a structure. And the choice is this: will the author have total understanding and control over the reality and laws of nature and physics and magic in their invented world? Or will they, the author, leave themselves out of the loop as much as the readers, or at least closer to the readers, to be perhaps surprised as much as the readers are at the wondrous capabilities of the magic and magical characters, with magical playing pieces, the magical toy soldiers, to kind of continue extending the metaphor. And it's so smart, I think, how Erikson fits this fantasy author debate in here metaphorically in this scene, building to the climax of this book. All that said, let's finish up this scene now. Renek picked up one of his soldiers and moved to place it opposite the Lord's lone figure. Like this, my lord? The old man frowned. I must add another. 2 against 1? No matter, one of mine is going to die. How do we fight with magic, my lord? Why, I'll roll the bones, of course. Then how do you know one of yours is going to die? Because magic demands meat, Renek, blood in the hand, fading heat, something broken, something dying, a crime unforgivable. Renek looked down at all the soldiers. My lord, are we gods? The old man snorted. Less than that. Less than who we are, in fact. Toy soldiers and dolls, puppets and deeds writ small, we're the venal manipulators of the unpleasant. With secret purpose, we lay waste to lives we ourselves have invented. With hopeless despair, we hammer home lessons no one pays any attention to. He laughed again, a bitter, caustic sound. All a waste, my young friend. All a waste. The old man began weeping then, and after a time, Renek reached down to the Lord's second mage and tipped the figure over until it was flat upon the ground. Okay, so that's the scene, and to wrap things up now, the battle still has to happen, and Erikson will go on to use this unique vantage point of this mock warfare toy soldier game simulation to tell a lot of the narrative of what happens in that battle. But he set up the scene so well that after just reading this introduction here, I'm just waiting to get back to find out what happens specifically with Renek's toys and versus the Old Lord's toys. I think more than anything, though, the scene is Erikson as the Old Lord, telling one of his young characters, a character he's already put through so much, telling that character exactly why warfare is idiotic. And Erikson is sparing one of his more victimized characters, Renek, from further traumas. I think there is something really beautiful about that. I think there's something really beautiful about that, and how Renek so badly wants his vengeance. He wants the violence of warfare. But we, the audience, we can forgive him wanting those things and not really understanding, because he literally is immature. He's a child. Meanwhile, a battle wages elsewhere in which adults who should be more mature have never actually outgrown their childish violent streaks. Furthermore, and I might actually argue against a little bit of what I just said there, but most of those characters in that battle, on an individual level, they're probably not immature. They probably do realize how childish the whole Civil War is, but on the larger scale, I think they're helpless to stop the battle from happening. Especially they think they're helpless to stop the battle from happening. So it's not even so much Erikson saying that those individual characters are childish in any way, but rather that the civilization that they're all slaves to is what's childish. And if you've watched any of my previous analysis videos, the one right before this, I talked about Rise Harriet, the Kharkanas historian. And in the scene that I read in that video, Rise Harriet criticizes this idea that past ages of civilization were a childhood to the current adult, kind of present day age. Really, I think what Erikson's arguing is that as long as self-destructive violence like civil wars persist, no one can say much progress or growing beyond childhood of any kind has really been made or has really happened. And the civilization is just as childish as it once was, and for that matter, just as mature as well. But the emotional pull of the Renek scene here is that a character is actually being spared from the self-destructive immaturity by the mad imagined game scenario of an old man. A beautiful, powerful scene, possibly my favorite of the whole book, and I think a fitting one to end on in this series of now up to 20 different scene readings and analysis videos that I've done here. If you've hung in there to this point, thank you so much for watching. Up next, I have other video ideas for some other series, other books I've been reading, and end of the year wrap-up videos, 2023 TBRs, all of that fun stuff. But thanks again so much for watching, and if you haven't, please like, subscribe, and share my channel with your friends. Thank you so much. Have a good one. Bye.